Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
We're your shortcut to getting truly well-informed without, all the overwhelm. We sift through a whole stack of global news sources, pull out the most important bits of knowledge, the insights, and really explore why they matter.
Cutting through the noise.
Exactly. Our mission is to give you that shortcut, maybe some surprising facts, keep it engaging enough so you stay hooked. Today, we're diving deep into some really significant headlines shaping our world. We've got complex geopolitical moves, big economic shifts.
And unfortunately, some critical humanitarian situations, too. Plus some surprising societal developments along the way.
Yeah, we're here to help you connect those dots, understand what's going on underneath the surface, and hopefully get a more nuanced view on things.
Absolutely. It's about the why as much as the what.
So let's get started. Let's begin our deep dive into the global landscape. Okay, first stop today. It's a really interesting development over in the Middle East. Al Jazeera is reporting that Pakistan's Prime Minister Sharif, he recently hosted Iran's President Pezeshkian.
Yes, that caught my eye, too.
And what really stands out is this agreement they've made. They want to seriously boost security and trade. They're aiming for, get this, $10 billion in bilateral trade.
$10 billion.
Yeah.
That's a serious number.
It really is, especially when you think about the complicated history between Pakistan and Iran.
Right. There have definitely been complexities.
So what's behind this? Is it a sudden shift? And what does it really mean for the region, maybe even beyond?
Well, I think it's more than just trade figures, This growing connection between Pakistan and Iran, it signals a kind of strategic realignment happening in the region. The focus seems to be very much on internal stability, first and foremost, and building economic resilience.
Okay.
And a key insight here, I think, is the real emphasis they're putting on security cooperation, specifically counterterrorism. Both countries have struggled with border security, threats from extremist groups, and this agreement looks like an attempt to create a more unified front against those kinds of challenges. The stated goal, as the sources point out, is pretty clear. Eliminate terrorism for regional peace and prosperity.
Right.
So beyond that $10 billion target, which, again, is a bold statement, it really points to a pragmatic desire to leverage their shared interests and, well, find new ways to grow economically.
That's a really strong point, the idea that internal stability is driving this external policy shift. And Al Jazeera also mentioned something else interesting. Analysts predicting a jump in informal trade.
Yeah, Jay.
And maybe even a new trade route opening up between Pakistan and Europe. That sounds like a potential game changer for commerce in that whole area.
It really could be.
But are they also thinking bigger picture diplomatically, like maybe positioning themselves to mediate between other countries in the region, help ease tensions elsewhere?
Absolutely. It seems the discussions definitely went beyond just what benefits them directly. They talked a lot about better border management, cooperating against security threats.
Yeah.
Which, that's fundamental if you want any kind of stable trade corridor, especially one aiming towards Europe.
Makes sense.
And you're right about the diplomatic angle. Despite past friction, periods where things were quite tense, Pakistan and Iran have actually kept diplomatic channels open pretty consistently. They've signed various agreements, memorandums of understanding over the years.
Okay.
So this idea of them stepping up, maybe acting as mediators between other regional players, it's just they want to project a more unified, maybe stabilizing presence. It could genuinely reshape some of the traditional geopolitical dynamics there. Offer an alternative maybe to existing trade paths, foster new economic and security ties.
Interesting.
In Central Asia, the Middle East. It feels like a calculated move, get the immediate economic wins, but also boost long-term regional security at the same time. It could subtly shift the power balance.
Okay, so from these evolving partnerships, let's shift our focus now to a place where stability is, still incredibly hard to find. Syria, specifically the Soweto province in the south. It's seeing a really disturbing spike in violence, according to Al Jazeera.
Yes, it's deeply concerning.
And this is happening despite what was supposed to be a ceasefire. We're seeing reports of Druze armed groups attacking internal security forces, casualties on both sides. It just paints a grim picture. Peace seems so fragile there.
It really does. The unrest in Soweto, it just underscores how incredibly precarious peace is across all of Syria, really. You've got these deeply entrenched political tensions, sectarian issues. They haven't gone away just because the main civil war isn't dominating headlines daily anymore.
Right.
This particular conflict seems rooted in long-standing issues between specific Druze factions and Bedouin tribal fighters, disputes over land, over scarce resources. It's the kind of localized dispute that's sadly pretty common in a country ravaged by war for so long.
And the government's response.
Well, the Syrian government has come out and explicitly accused rebel gangs, they call them, of violating the ceasefire. They're saying these are treacherous attacks. This latest wave of violence apparently kicked off around July 13th, and it's already led to multiple deaths, government soldiers, local fighters. What's really crucial to understand, I think, is that Syria isn't just one single conflict. It's this complex mosaic, a patchwork of different internal and external flashpoints, each with its own history, its own grievances, its own power struggles.
And just to make it even more complicated, Israel has also been involved conducting strikes on Syrian troops.
That's right. Reportedly, Israel's justification is protecting the Druze community there.
So you've got internal ethnic and resource conflicts, the ongoing civil war fallout, and then external actors like Israel stepping in, adding another layer of complexity. Potential for wider escalation, too, presumably.
Precisely. Israel's intervention, even if framed as protective, it just adds another volatile element. It could potentially draw in other international players, create new front lines. It's risky.
And on top of all that, we're also hearing reports from the Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, that's the Kurdish-led group.
Yes.
They're reporting casualties from an attack by the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, ISIL. This was in eastern Syria, in Deir ez-Zor province.
Exactly. So ISIL is still active, still capable of carrying out attacks, particularly in those eastern regions. Despite major efforts to defeat them, their continued presence in places like Deir ez-Zor shows that the underlying threats, terrorism, instability, they continue to plague the region.
It's a constant battle on multiple fronts, isn't it? New threats popping up, even while the old ones linger.
It really is. It's a stark reminder that even when global attention shifts elsewhere, the conditions that fuel these extremist groups often remain, and the conflicts are all interconnected. A flare-up in one area, like Soweto, can quickly ripple outwards. It involves multiple actors, all with different goals, different histories. It's just deeply volatile. No easy answers, no quick fixes in sight. It highlights the immense challenge of achieving any kind of lasting peace.
And as we're tracking these ongoing conflicts, thinking about the human toll, the situation in Israel and Gaza remains just a central and frankly harrowing focus in the news.
Undeniably.
We're seeing multiple reports, including from RT, highlighting findings from a UK-based non-governmental organization that's Action on Armed Violence, or AOAV. And they are strongly criticizing the Israeli military, the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, for what they describe as a failure to properly investigate accusations of war crimes against its own personnel.
Yes, and this is an incredibly serious charge.
It raises profound questions about accountability, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. This whole issue really goes to the heart of accountability in conflict zones, especially when you see, patterns emerging, patterns of investigations that seem insufficient or lead to very few actual consequences. The AOAV report, it's quite stark. They looked at 52 publicly acknowledged IDF probes into alleged war crimes. This is in Gaza and the West Bank.
Okay.
And out of those 52, only one single case resulted in a prison sentence, just one. So the concern AOAV is expressing is that these investigations might be prioritizing protecting the institution's image, its legitimacy, over actually pursuing justice for potential victims. Most cases just remain unresolved, or they lead to minimal consequences. And AOAV says this pattern is consistent with what they saw in past conflicts in Gaza, where most complaints were closed without even launching criminal probes.
So it's not a new concern.
Apparently not. The report specifically calls out a lack of updates on progress for about 3/4 of the cases they monitored, including some really high-profile incidents like the killing of civilians who were queuing for flour and also a specific airstrike in Rafah. Now, the IDF's campaign in Gaza, we should remember, followed the attack by Hamas last year, and it has led to very significant civilian casualties, which is what prompted these accusations in the first place. But the findings undeniably point towards a potential systemic issue around transparency and justice when it comes to military actions in active conflict zones.
And the human cost, just the raw human suffering in Gaza, it just keeps mounting. Reuters is reporting that Palestinians there are facing desperate starvation. More deaths are now being directly attributed to hunger.
It's a humanitarian catastrophe unfolding.
And while this is happening, you have Israel pointing fingers at United Nations UN trucks, saying they're responsible for delayed fuel delivery, which makes the crisis even worse.
The blame game.
Meanwhile, other outlets like Yahoo Sports, the New York Times, they're questioning how much aid is actually getting through since Israel announced it was easing restrictions. It just feels like, I don't know, a totally impossible situation. Everyone's blaming everyone else for the aid delays while people are actually starving. It's like some tragic game of hot potato, honestly.
It is an immense tragedy playing out in real time.
Hmm.
And the whole situation around aid delivery and around the hostages held in Gaza, it just highlights the profound human cost.
Yeah.
And it shows the deep complexities of using things like aid or even people as leverage in these geopolitical struggles.
Right.
The UN has raised grave concerns about this starvation crisis. They're specifically highlighting the plight of around 1 million women and girls, who often suffer disproportionately in these situations. Gaza's own Ministry of Health has reported numerous deaths directly from what they call forced starvation.
Oh, that's awful.
And adding another layer to this agony, the BBC reports leaders condemning videos that have surfaced showing Israeli captives held by Palestinian groups looking emaciated.
Yeah, I saw those reports. Horrific.
Al Jazeera then details that Hamas has apparently expressed openness to allowing the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, to deliver aid to those Israeli captives. This came after a request from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Okay, so maybe a small opening there.
Potentially, but Hamas has conditions. They stated that their captives currently receive the same essentials as their own fighters and people, and they outlined specific requirements for aid delivery, things like guaranteed humanitarian corridors, and critically, a stop to Israeli attacks during these aid deliveries.
Which makes it incredibly difficult, politically and logistically.
Exactly. It creates this incredibly tough humanitarian and political dilemma. Aid becomes a bargaining chip in a desperate ongoing conflict.
And then, just when you think tensions can't get any higher, Yahoo reports that Israel's far-right national security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir,
Yes.
he led prayers at Jerusalem's most sensitive holy site, the one revered by Jews as the Temple Mount and by Muslims as Haram el-Sharif.
That's always a flashpoint.
Absolutely. It drew immediate, widespread international condemnation, and it just escalates tensions further right in the middle of the Gaza war. Apparently, he's visited this highly contested site frequently during the conflict.
That site, the Temple Mount or Haram al-Sharif, it's profoundly sacred. It's symbolic. It's a flashpoint for both Jewish and Muslim communities globally. So any actions there that are seen as provocative are incredibly sensitive. They have the potential to ignite much broader unrest very quickly.
And Ben-Gvir's actions are seen that way.
Widely, yes. They're seen as deliberately trying to escalate religious and political tensions, which are already, frankly, at a boiling point because of Gaza. It directly challenges the very delicate status quo agreement for managing the holy site, and it inevitably fuels further cycles of unrest, more international condemnation. You've got this interplay. The dire humanitarian crisis, the urgent questions about accountability, the agonizing hostage situation, and then these highly symbolic, provocative political acts. It creates an almost intractable problem. The consequences for civilians on all sides are severe, and it just undermines any effort towards de-escalation.
Okay, let's shift gears now and turn our attention to the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. It continues to just dominate global headlines, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the ripple effects are felt far beyond Eastern Europe.
It really has become this global tug-of-war. You see it in fiery parliamentary debates in the U.S. You see the huge energy trade impacts across Europe and Asia.
And diplomatic efforts are churning along,
Yeah.
but slowly.
Exactly. Let's start with the controversy over U.S. aid to Ukraine. RT covered this extensively, U.S. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene's view. She called funding for Kyiv a complete betrayal of the American people.
Yes, she claims Americans want an end to foreign wars.
That perspective really highlights a major split in American politics right now, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Representative Greene's comments, they really articulate a significant fault line within U.S. politics when it comes to foreign policy, foreign aid, especially concerning Ukraine. She was fiercely critical of that $54.6 billion aid bill introduced by senators. Her argument is essentially that Europe should be paying more, bearing a greater financial burden. And she also suggested the funds could be misused. She even went so far as to call Ukrainian President Zelensky a dictator.
Which is, yeah, very strong language.
Extremely charged. Russia, for its part, consistently argues that this kind of aid just escalates the conflict, leads to more bloodshed. So this internal U.S. debate, it's not just talk. It has direct, profound implications for where the war might go next, and for the unity of the international coalition supporting Ukraine. It's really a clash between sort of isolationist versus interventionist foreign policy views.
And the economic fallout in Europe from all this, it's just staggering when you see the figures. RT reported Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko claiming the European Union, the EU, has lost over €1 trillion since cutting energy and trade ties with Moscow over the Ukraine conflict.
Over €1 trillion.
Yeah, trade between the EU and Russia apparently plummeted from $417 billion back in 2013 down to just $60 billion in 2023.
A massive drop.
And Russian President Vladimir Putin himself claims EU countries lost $200 billion just by rejecting Russian gas specifically. Moscow, of course, sees the EU's sanctions as illegal.
Right. Now, the figures coming from Moscow, you obviously have to consider the source. They might reflect the strategic narrative.
Sure.
But that said, they paint a stark picture of what is undeniably a huge economic cost for the EU. Severing those long-standing energy and trade ties, that was a direct result of the sanctions imposed after Russia's actions in Ukraine.
Right. Russia was a huge energy supplier.
Exactly. Before 2022, Russia was the primary energy supplier for many European nations, and completely rerouting that supply chain, plus all the other trade disruptions. It has undeniably hit European industries, European consumers. Higher energy prices, lost market access. Beyond that headline $1 trillion figure, what's perhaps more significant is the long-term structural shift this is forcing on Europe.
How so?
Well, European industries, especially the energy-intensive ones, they're facing a fundamental recalibration. It's forcing a faster, maybe more painful transition to alternative energy sources, building new, supposedly more secure supply chains. This could really change Europe's industrial competitiveness for decades to come.
And Moscow calling the sanctions illegal?
That just underscores the deep legal and political chasm that's opened up between Russia and the West. This economic pressure, it's absolutely central to the geopolitical strategy on both sides. It's essentially a form of economic warfare.
And the global economic web gets even more tangled when you bring India into this. RT and Bloomberg highlighted criticism from U.S. figures, Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, Senator Marco Rubio.
Yes, directed at New Delhi.
Right. They're accusing India of, quote, financing the Ukraine conflict because India is buying Russian oil. And then you have former President Trump threatening massive tariffs, 100% tariffs on exports from any country buying Russian oil unless Russia agrees to a peace deal.
That's quite a threat.
But India is pushing back strongly. They're defending their decision, saying it's crucial for maintaining stability in the global crude market, which is clearly straining U.S.-India relations.
Yeah, this situation perfectly illustrates that complex, sometimes contradictory web of global dependencies we live in. India is a major emerging economy, a huge energy consumer. They face a practical reality. They need oil. And discounted Russian oil. That offers a clear economic advantage, especially when global energy markets are so volatile.
Makes sense from their perspective.
Right. But the U.S. criticism, Trump's tariff threat, that's a direct attempt to force India into line with Western sanctions against Russia, using economic leverage for geopolitical alignment.
Okay.
India's defense, though, is strategic. By emphasizing their role in stabilizing the global crude market, they position their actions as pragmatic, even beneficial globally, not just self-serving. This tension really highlights the challenge of multilateral cooperation when economic priorities and geopolitical goals diverge so sharply, especially for large non-Western economies like India, who are increasingly trying to chart their own course.
Okay, so what about the diplomatic front? There seems to be some movement, but it feels like a real roller coaster. Al Jazeera and RT reported that former U.S. President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is heading to Russia for more talks on the Ukraine war.
Yes, continuing those discussions.
And Trump has really been emphasizing the urgency, hasn't he? Stop the killing, make a deal. He even threatens severe tariffs on Russia if there's no ceasefire soon. He set an August 8th deadline.
A very Trumpian approach, setting a hard deadline like that.
Meanwhile, Ukraine is expecting to receive a U.S.-made Patriot missile system.
Right, so military support continues alongside diplomacy.
And the Kremlin. They're indicating President Putin is open to meeting President Zelensky, but only after necessary preparations. And significantly, Moscow keeps questioning Zelensky's legitimacy.
Yeah, that's a major sticking point. Setting a special envoy, setting that strict, almost transactional deadline. That's classic Trump negotiation style. Maximum pressure for a quick deal. But the conditions from the Kremlin, especially questioning Zelensky's legitimacy, they reveal the deep, fundamental barriers to any real high-level breakthrough.
What are those barriers?
Well, Russia has consistently insisted that any peace deal has to recognize what it calls the new territorial realities in Ukraine, which Kiev, understandably, completely rejects as a violation of its sovereignty.
Right.
And the fact that the Patriot missile system delivery is happening at the same time, that just reinforces the continued U.S. military support for Ukraine. It shows that even while diplomatic avenues are being explored, the military side of things is still very active. It's a clear signal. Both sides are preparing for continued engagement on all fronts: battlefield, economy, diplomacy, even while talks are supposedly happening.
And one final point on this conflict, RT is reporting ongoing Ukrainian drone activity that's increasingly hitting inside Russian territory.
Yes, that's become a more regular feature.
Apparently, Ukrainian drones disrupted civilian rail traffic, caused a power outage in Russia's Volgograd region recently. Reportedly, 61 drones were shot down in one raid, but there was still ground damage, train delays up to 4 hours.
Significant disruption.
Ukrainian authorities understandably see this as putting pressure on Moscow for a ceasefire. Russia, predictably, accuses Ukraine of targeting civilian infrastructure.
This escalating drone activity, it really represents a significant tactical shift. It brings the direct impact of the war deeper into Russia itself.
Making it feel real for Russians.
Exactly. Ukraine frames it as pressure, forcing Moscow to feel the costs of war domestically. Russia's accusation of targeting civilian infrastructure that serves their strategic narrative rally internal support condemn Kyiv internationally, but disrupting essential services like trains, power, that directly impacts civilian lives, the economy. It just underscores how the conflict is expanding beyond the immediate front lines.
It's that modern warfare aspect, isn't it? Low cost, potentially high impact.
Precisely. Both sides are using drones more and more to exert maximum pressure. It shows the war is far from being contained to just traditional battlefields.
Okay, moving now to another tense border situation. Al Jazeera and DW report that South Korea has started dismantling those propaganda loudspeakers along its border with North Korea.
Ah, yes, the loudspeakers. A feature for decades.
This seems like a deliberate policy shift under the current president Lee Jae-myung, trying to ease tensions, maybe revive dialogue.
That appears to be the intention, yes.
It follows them halting the actual propaganda broadcasts earlier. But what's been the reaction from North Korea? Have they reciprocated at all?
Well, that's the crucial question, isn't it? This move by South Korea really brings up the question of how effective these unilateral de-escalation gestures are when the other side, well, when they remain largely unresponsive.
So no positive response from Pyongyang.
Not really, no. The symbolic act of taking down the loudspeakers is clear. It ends decades of that kind of psychological warfare across the border. But North Korea, as the sources report, has shown very little, if any, reciprocal interest in actually engaging in meaningful talks. They expect to have all the loudspeakers removed by the end of the week. The stated goal is normalizing relations, fostering dialogue despite all the challenges. But getting genuine dialogue with Pyongyang, that's usually far more complex. It often requires significant concessions, guarantees, things South Korea might not be willing or able to offer right now.
So it's a step, but maybe a lonely one for now.
It's a unilateral step towards peace, certainly. But its ultimate impact really hinges entirely on whether North Korea decides to reciprocate.
Yeah.
And historically, their willingness has been limited.
Right. Okay. From one contentious border to another kind of international controversy, the BBC is discussing plans for the UK's new Chinese embassy in Europe.
Ah, yes, the one planned for London.
If it goes ahead, it's set to be the largest Chinese embassy in the region. But there's opposition. People are raising serious concerns, hacking threats, security vulnerabilities, potential conflicts. It's sparking some heated debates in the UK.
Understandably so. The sheer scale of it alone raises questions.
Why is size such an issue?
Well, such a large diplomatic presence, especially from a country known for significant intelligence capabilities like China, it naturally raises concerns about surveillance, intelligence gathering within the host country. For the UK, trying to balance its diplomatic relationship with China against its own national security interests, that's a very delicate tightrope walk.
And there's history there with cyber incidents and so on.
Exactly. Past incidents attributed to state-backed actors that fuels these anxieties.
And then there's this other related story, also from the BBC. Truly troubling allegations that Chinese university students studying abroad are supposedly being instructed to spy on their classmates.
Yes, I saw that report. Extremely concerning.
Even lecturers facing harassment if they don't comply. That just sounds unreal, like something out of a spy thriller, not a university classroom. That's a whole new layer, doesn't it?
It really does. It's profoundly concerning. It goes against the entire principle of academic freedom, open inquiry that universities are supposed to stand for. Ministers in the UK have stressed a zero-tolerance policy towards these kinds of threats, which is really the necessary stance given the implications.
So it suggests a pattern.
It potentially suggests a pattern of internal surveillance that extends even to citizens abroad or within educational settings. It inevitably creates an atmosphere of mistrust, and it just further complicates the already strained relationship between China and many Western nations.
Okay, let's pivot across the Atlantic now. RT is reporting some really strong words coming from Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva.
Lula, what's he saying?
He has directly accused the United States of economic blackmail, and he condemned Washington's attempt to use political pressure to impose economic punishment on Brazil.
Wow, economic blackmail. That's incredibly strong language from a head of state, especially towards the U.S.
It really is.
You know, Lula's strong language here is particularly noteworthy. It seems to signal a broader trend we're seeing among several non-Western nations. They're pushing back, quite assertively, against what they perceive as economic coercion from the West. It's an assertion of economic sovereignty.
So he's framing it as defending Brazil's interests.
Precisely. Lula emphasized Brazil would steadfastly defend its national interests on the world stage. He highlighted the country's growing economic independence from the U.S. He specifically criticized the U.S. for, in his view, undermining multilateralism, that principle of cooperation between many countries.
Right.
And for pushing instead for bilateral deals, which he argues inherently favor the larger, more powerful countries. This perspective really aligns with a broader narrative you hear from emerging economies. They're seeking to rebalance global economic power away from what they see as long-standing Western dominance.
And the specific threat that seems to have triggered this. Former President Trump threatened a 50% tariff on Brazilian exports.
Yes, that's the context.
That would make it Brazil's highest U.S. import tariff globally. It sounds potentially crippling for them.
It would be a massive blow, yes.
Yeah.
A 50% tariff is not just punitive. It's designed to be potentially devastating for Brazil's export-driven economy. And crucially, Trump overtly linked that tariff threat to other issues, accusations against a former Brazilian president, Jair Bolsonaro, and sanctions on a Brazilian Supreme Court justice.
So using trade as a direct political weapon.
Exactly. It highlights how economic pressure is being used directly as a political tool, trying to influence Brazil's internal affairs.
And Lula's response?
He reaffirmed Brazil's commitment to negotiating on equal terms, and he pointedly advocated for diversifying international commerce away from the U.S. dollar.
Ah, the de-dollarization theme again.
Absolutely. It's a deliberate, long-term strategic push. Brazil's stance within the BRICS group, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, clearly aims to bolster multilateralism and actively reduce reliance on the U.S. dollar. It's a direct challenge to the current global financial order. This whole situation just underscores how tangled economic relationships and political leverage have become, and how nations are actively looking for alternatives to traditional Western-centric financial systems to protect their sovereignty and economic interests.
Let's stick with Europe for a moment, but look at a different kind of challenge, social and economic. RT reports a significant debate happening in Germany. Markus Söder, he's the head of the German state of Bavaria.
Yes, a prominent conservative figure.
He believes German authorities should stop Ukrainian refugees from getting the increased social benefits they were granted under a special law back in May 2022.
This issue. It's becoming quite contentious.
It really brings that classic debate to the forefront, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Humanitarian support versus economic realities.
It absolutely does. And it has significant social and political ripple effects within Germany. Currently, Ukrainians receive larger benefit payments than other asylum seekers in Germany. Söder argues this disparity is costing the German government billions of euros.
And his proposed solution.
He argues that providing them with the standard, regular refugee benefits instead would encourage more of them to find employment. He pointed out that only about 30% of Ukrainian refugees were employed as of June 2024. And you have to remember the scale. Over 1 million Ukrainians were residing in Germany by December 2024. So the sheer financial strain on public funds and the whole question of integration, these are becoming major political issues. Söder's stance represents a kind of pragmatic cost-benefit analysis coming from a conservative political viewpoint.
You do have to wonder, though, how all this policy debate affects the refugees themselves. People trying to build a new life in a new country under incredibly stressful circumstances.
Absolutely. It's a critical consideration.
The German government coalition, they do apparently plan to cut payments for new Ukrainian arrivals after April 1st next year, moving them to the standard refugee benefits.
Right, for future arrivals.
But for now, current new arrivals are still getting the higher citizens benefit, so it's creating a kind of two-tiered system as well. Must be confusing for everyone.
Precisely. It creates a highly complex situation on the ground, both for the authorities managing it and, more importantly, for the refugees navigating it. For individuals who've already been through the trauma of war, displacement, adjusting to a new country is incredibly hard. A shift in benefit structures just adds another layer of uncertainty, potential hardship.
What's the government's rationale, besides cost?
Well, the intent from policymakers like Soder is clearly to incentivize faster integration into the labor market. However, employment rates depend on so many things: language barriers, getting qualifications recognized, the psychological toll of displacement.
Yeah.
It's not just about the level of benefits. This proposed policy change really reflects a growing internal debate within Germany, a debate about the long-term sustainability of its historically quite generous refugee support system, especially given the length of the Ukraine conflict and the sheer number of people seeking refuge there. It's that constant tension between compassion and fiscal responsibility playing out.
Okay, let's turn our focus now to the United States. The political scene there remains, well, dramatic, unpredictable.
That seems like a fair description.
It often feels like you're watching some kind of political reality show. You've got politicians literally fleeing the state, fighter jets getting scrambled over golf courses. I mean,
That's certainly eventful.
let's start with this redistricting standoff in Texas. Al Jazeera and the New York Times are reporting that Texas Democrats have left the state en masse. Why? To block a vote on new U.S. House maps.
Yes, the controversial redistricting plan.
Republicans, backed by former President Trump, they hope these new maps will help them win additional House seats in the 2026 midterm elections.
It's all about gaining that electoral advantage.
And this move by the Democrats, leaving the state, it's described as a last-ditch effort. It echoes something similar they did back in 2021 to block new voting restrictions.
That's right, denying the quorum.
So what's happening here, fundamentally?
This Texas redistricting battle, it's really a prime example of partisan gerrymandering in action. That's where political districts are deliberately redrawn to heavily favor one party over the other. Essentially, it tries to lock in an electoral advantage for years, regardless of shifts in overall voter sentiment.
And leaving the state stops the vote.
By leaving, the Democrats aim to deny the State House the minimum number of members required to legally conduct business. That's the quorum. It effectively stalls the legislative process, preventing the maps from being passed.
What's the risk for the Democrats doing this?
Well, Texas Governor Greg Abbott has openly threatened to have these lawmakers removed from office. They also face potential fines, other penalties. The stakes are incredibly high in this political chess game over future elections. And it's important to remember, this isn't just about winning one election. It's a fundamental challenge to the idea of proportional representation. Gerrymandering can lead to legislatures that are less responsive, more polarized, where politicians feel safer in their districts and less accountable to the broader public. It really impacts the health of the democratic process.
And the political drama continues. Al Jazeera and the New York Times are also covering the White House defending former President Trump's firing of Erica McEntarfer.
Ah, yes, the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or BLS.
Exactly, the top official responsible for employment statistics. Trump claimed the jobs report was rigged to make him look bad. That sparked huge concerns about the credibility of government data.
Understandably so. That's a serious accusation against a statistical agency.
White House advisors, they question the accuracy of the figures, emphasize transparency. But this happened alongside significant revisions to employment data, which then led to doubts about the real impact of Trump's tariffs.
It becomes very murky very quickly.
And economists, they're pretty critical of politicizing a statistics agency like BLS.
As they should be. Politicizing official economic data is profoundly concerning for any functioning democracy. The BLS is supposed to be impartial, non-political. Its job is to provide objective economic information to everyone, the public, policymakers.
Right, based on facts.
Exactly. So when the integrity of that data is questioned, especially by the executive branch itself, it severely undermines public trust in government institutions. It makes it much harder for policymakers, businesses, ordinary citizens to make informed decisions based on reliable facts.
And the revisions to the data.
Revisions happen. That's normal to some extent as more information comes in. But here, they're being framed within this highly charged political narrative. They're being directly linked to debates about whether economic policies, like tariffs, are actually working. The whole situation just highlights how critically important it is to maintain the independence and credibility of statistical agencies. Public confidence in government information relies on it.
And then, just to add to the slightly surreal feel, RT reports 5 unauthorized incursions into restricted airspace over former President Trump's golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey. This was just over the weekend.
5 incursions. That seems like a lot.
Apparently, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, that's NORAD, they actually scrambled U.S. fighter jets each time, deployed flares to alert the civilian aircraft, escorted them safely out of the Temporary Flight Restriction Zone, or TFR.
Standard procedure for NORAD in that situation.
NORAD has since issued a warning to general aviation pilots. Check your FAA notices before you fly.
Well, yes, that seems like basic airmanship, especially near sensitive areas. This is a serious security matter, though. Given the presence of a former president, that airspace is automatically designated as highly sensitive.
So TFRs are common?
Yes, temporary flight restriction zones are established around high-profile locations, major events, precisely for national security reasons. The fact that there were 5 separate incursions suggests either a significant lack of awareness among some pilots about these restrictions, or, more worryingly, perhaps a deliberate disregard for critical safety protocols. NORAD Swift responds scrambling jets. Using flares, that's exactly what they're trained to do. Ensure the safety of the airspace, protect the people on the ground. It underscores the constant vigilance needed to protect high-profile individuals and locations. Even if these specific incidents turn out to be due to pilot negligence rather than anything malicious, it's a clear reminder. Follow the rules, check the notices. Airspace management requires constant attention.
Okay, let's shift our focus now squarely onto the global economy. We're seeing trade deals sparking controversy, major labor strikes, volatile market reactions. It really paints a picture of intense pressure tactics in global trade, doesn't it? Where fear, economic fear, seems to be driving some huge decisions, often with surprising results. It's a lot to take in.
It certainly is a complex picture right now.
Let's start with the EU. Multiple RT articles are revealing that the European Union Commission President Ursula von der Leyen agreed to what's being called a lopsided U.S. trade deal.
Lopsided? In what way?
Well, she reportedly accepted a 15% tariff on most EU exports to the U.S., and apparently the reason was fear. Fear that Washington might cut back military support for Ukraine or even pull U.S. troops out of Europe altogether.
Wow. So negotiating from a position of fear, essentially. That's significant.
It highlights just how deeply tangled security concerns and economic policy have become on the global stage, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the agreement, as described in those reports, it seemed to go way beyond just tariffs. It allegedly includes huge EU commitments back to the U.S., investing something like $600 billion in the U.S. economy.
$600 billion.
And purchasing $750 billion worth of American energy over the next 3 years.
Massive numbers.
They really are. Unsurprisingly, this decision has apparently faced fierce internal criticism back in Brussels. French President Emmanuel Macron, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. They've openly accused von der Leyen of overstepping her authority. They've questioned her leadership, especially over allegations she pledged to buy large amounts of U.S. arms without wider consultation.
So, internal EU tensions flaring up.
Definitely. Some members of the European Parliament, MEPs, are reportedly viewing her current term as her last chance, even though she recently survived a vote of confidence. And her previous moves, like redirecting EU funds towards militarization. Well, this deal seems to fit into a broader strategic shift towards more military economic alignment with the U.S., but it certainly raises critical questions about democratic oversight and the balance of power within the EU itself.
And it seems it's not just the EU feeling this kind of aggressive trade pressure from the U.S. RT also detailed how Swiss President Corinne Keller-Sutter faced serious backlash after trade talks with the U.S. collapsed, apparently after a disastrous phone call with former President Trump.
Yes, the Swiss situation, that was quite something.
They were expecting maybe a 10% tariff, which is already significant.
Right, manageable perhaps, but still a hit.
But Trump reportedly slapped a punitive 39% levy on Swiss goods instead.
39%, that's huge for Switzerland.
And get this, He apparently rejected a $150 billion investment offer from Switzerland. Money heading to the U.S. Rejected it, focused solely on Switzerland's trade surplus with the U.S.
Rejecting a $150 billion investment.
Hmm.
That's unconventional, to say the least.
Swiss media called it Keller-Sutter's biggest fiasco. It really feels like the U.S., under that administration anyway, was playing extreme hardball on trade, even with traditional allies.
It absolutely does. The Swiss case is another really stark example of those aggressive, often unpredictable trade tactics being employed. The Swiss genuinely expected something around 10%, to then get hit with 39% after a phone call and have a massive investment offer just dismissed. It signals a complete disregard for traditional diplomatic give-and-take economic incentives.
What's the official U.S. line?
Well, U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer later clarified that no final deal was actually reached, which indicates there's still uncertainty. But the immediate impact in Switzerland, it was clearly a blow to confidence, both in their leadership and their international economic standing. Both the EU and the Swiss examples, they demonstrate a clear willingness from the U.S. side, at least then, to prioritize perceived national economic interests, particularly addressing trade imbalances above almost everything else, even if it damaged relationships with longstanding allies. This aggressive, unilateral approach, it's profoundly reshaping global trade dynamics, creating a new, perhaps more confrontational paradigm for international economic engagement.
Shifting from trade deals to labor action now, we're seeing major news from Boeing, the aerospace giant, Yahoo, AP News, Bloomberg. They're all reporting that over 3,000 Boeing workers, the ones who build crucial fighter jets, are planning to strike.
Yes, after rejecting a modified labor agreement.
This isn't just any strike, is it? It feels like a powerful statement, especially coming from the defense sector.
No, it's definitely significant. These are highly skilled workers, members of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, the IAM District 837. They work at Boeing facilities in St. Louis, St. Charles in Missouri, and also Muscuda, Illinois. And this is actually the first strike for these Boeing Defense Union workers since way back in 1996.
Wow, nearly 30 years.
Exactly. That makes it historically significant. The immediate impact is pretty clear. It's going to create major operational challenges, production delays for Boeing. It will directly affect the output of crucial aircraft and defense systems.
And the wider implications.
Well, given Boeing's role as a massive defense contractor, a prolonged strike could have far-reaching consequences, not just for the company's finances, but potentially for national defense readiness, military supply chains, the entire aerospace industry. It's a powerful demonstration of labor's leverage, particularly in these critical national industries. It underscores those ongoing tensions between corporate profitability and worker demands for better pay and benefits, especially in such a high-stakes sector.
Okay, looking at the broader market picture now, Reuters reports oil prices dipped a bit. Why? Because the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries plus OPEC, plus they're going ahead with the planned output hike in September.
Yes, increasing supply by about 547,000 barrels per day.
This decision impacts global market share, obviously, and seems to have left traders feeling a bit uncertain.
Oil markets are always sensitive to supply signals.
And CNBC highlights stock futures were rising amidst all the uncertainty about the economy. Tariffs, updates on the Dow, S&P 500, NASDAQ futures showed global indexes being affected by weak U.S. jobs data, causing fluctuations. But despite risks, stocks seem to have settled lower overall.
It's a classic market contradiction sometimes. When we connect all these dots, the labor disputes, the geopolitical decisions like tariffs, the energy policy shifts from OPEC++, we're seeing just how rapidly these global events can ripple through financial markets and impact everyday industries.
So OPEC+'s decision.
Increasing output, that's their response to a whole complex mix of factors. Global demand forecasts, internal politics among members, the strategic positioning of oil producers. Putting more supply into the market, theoretically, that should push prices down. But the uncertainty for traders comes from balancing that increased supply against, well, evolving demand forecasts and the overall health of the global economy. It's not straightforward.
And the stock market. Rising futures, but lower settlement.
That reflects the constant push and pull. Weak jobs data might signal an economic slowdown, which could be bad for stocks, but maybe positive corporate earnings reports or expectations about future interest rate cuts could push futures up temporarily. It's just a dynamic, often contradictory environment. Different news items pull the market in different directions all the time, creating that volatility we see.
Okay, finally in this economic section, let's head to the United Kingdom. The BBC reports on a major financial issue brewing. Car finance mis-selling. The Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA, They're going to consult on a redress scheme for motorists who were missold car finance deals in the past.
All right, this has been rumbling for a while.
But here's the catch. Apparently, many drivers won't even be eligible, and those who are eligible, they're set to receive, on average, less than £950 per deal.
Less than £1,000 after potentially being overcharged significantly.
Seems low, right? Especially when the banks involved could be facing a potential bill of at least £9 billion overall. $9 billion. That's quite a gap between the total payout and individual compensation. Highlights a real challenge for the regulator, doesn't it? I can just picture people digging through dusty boxes looking for paperwork from 2007.
It's a truly massive undertaking, absolutely. And the industry's reaction, they've basically said the compensation plan is completely impractical. Their main worry, as the BBC notes, is exactly what you said, records. Many firms, individual brokers involved back then, they might simply not have the records anymore going back to 2007. That makes it incredibly difficult to accurately assess who's missold what and process individual claims fairly.
A logistical nightmare.
Pretty much. But the sheer scale of the potential liability, $9 billion or more for the banks, that vividly underscores just how widespread these mis-selling practices might have been back then. The SCA's job is consumer protection, but they're facing this immense challenge, implementing a fair scheme for a complex issue with huge historical data gaps. It really highlights the long-term consequences when financial regulation perhaps wasn't tight enough in previous years, and the struggle now to deliver comprehensive justice to consumers, sometimes decades later. It shows just how hard retroactive justice can be in these big, complex financial systems. #humanitarian and societal updates.
All right, let's turn now to some critical humanitarian and societal updates from different parts of the world. These stories really remind us of the human impact behind the headlines. We have to start with a tragic, ongoing crisis: the deadly sinkings of migrant boats. Al Jazeera, DW, the BBC, the New York Times, they're all reporting a truly harrowing boat sinking off the coast of Yemen.
Yes, another terrible loss of life at sea.
More than 60 refugees and migrants confirmed dead, and dozens more are still missing. Just awful.
This kind of tragedy, it just underscores the sheer desperation that pushes individuals to undertake these incredibly perilous journeys. They know the risks, often, but they do it anyway. And the ongoing conflict in Yemen itself, that just adds to the regional instability driving migration.
What happened in this specific incident?
It seems a boat carrying around 150 people, mostly from Ethiopia, capsized in the Arabian Sea. Strong winds, almost certainly overcrowding. The usual tragic factors. Authorities recovered 54 bodies, initially 12 survivors. But the death toll is sadly expected to climb.
That route between Yemen and the Horn of Africa, it's notoriously dangerous.
It's described as one of the busiest and simultaneously one of the most dangerous migration routes globally, often run by smugglers who just pack people onto unseaworthy boats, far beyond any safe capacity. Hundreds, possibly thousands, have died on this route over the past decade. There had been a recent decrease in arrivals, reportedly due to increased patrols, but clearly the danger persists. The UN specifically reported 68 African migrants killed in this single event. It's just a stark, devastating reminder. Global inequalities, regional conflicts, humanitarian crises, they all combine to push people towards these extreme, life-threatening choices, just searching for safety or maybe a marginally better life.
And from the dangers of the sea to the dangers deep underground, the BBC and DW report on a mine collapse in Chile, known for its huge mining industry.
Yes, the El Teniente copper mine.
Rescuers there have sadly ended their search. They found the bodies of 5 miners who were trapped after a collapse, apparently caused by an earthquake. All 5 were found dead.
It's a truly devastating outcome. Mining, even in countries with relatively strong safety records like Chile, it still carries inherent risks. The rescue operations were extensive, involved digging new passages underground to try and reach them.
Do they know if it was just the earthquake, or did mining operations play a part?
That remains unclear at the moment. Was it purely the natural seismic activity, or did the mining itself contribute to some structural instability, maybe making existing geological weaknesses worse? Codelco, the state-run company that operates the mine, they've announced a full investigation. They plan to bring in international experts to figure out the exact cause and, crucially, to improve future safety measures. While Chile's mining industry is generally considered relatively safe, with significant improvements over the years, this tragedy is a stark reminder of the dangers involved in resource extraction, especially in geologically active regions like the Andes. It's that difficult balance between economic activity and human safety.
Okay, let's turn to the United Kingdom now. We're seeing kind of a two-sided story around immigration. On one hand, a determined government crackdown on people smugglers.
Yes, targeting the cross-channel crossings.
And on the other hand, ongoing societal tensions related to migration. The BBC reports the UK government is pledging an extra 100 million to tackle people smuggling.
What will that money fund?
Up to 300 additional officers for the National Crime Agency, new technology, new equipment. It's specifically aimed at combating smugglers who use social media to advertise these illegal English Channel crossings.
Right, disrupting the business model.
And those found guilty of smuggling face up to 5 years in prison. The context here is the Home Office reporting a record number of migrants making that dangerous journey this year.
So the pressure is on the government to act.
But this aggressive stance, it raises that crucial question, doesn't it? Will more funding, tougher penalties, will that actually solve the root causes driving people to make these journeys? Or does it just push the problem further underground, maybe making the crossings even more dangerous?
It's an incredible complex issue, absolutely. And public opinion on it is clearly highly charged, deeply divided. The government's investment, the tougher penalties, that reflects a clear political priority. Disrupt the smuggling networks, reduce the number of irregular arrivals. That's the goal.
But the opposition isn't convinced.
No. The opposition has criticized these plans, often calling them too little too late. They tend to propose even stricter strategies, sometimes including automatic deportation for unauthorized arrivals. It just highlights that deep political divide on how best to tackle the issue, swinging between deterrence and humanitarian concerns.
And the societal impact?
Well, the BBC also featured some really poignant interviews from their Panorama program. They spoke to two individuals who had participated in anti-migrant protests after an attack in Southport. One of them, a stepmother, expressed deep regret for getting her son involved in the riots. It puts a raw human face on that highly charged public sentiment. It shows the deep frustrations, but also sometimes the later remorse among people caught up in these demonstrations. It really reflects how deeply this issue is impacting communities, individuals across the UK.
Shifting focus now to Mexico. Yahoo and DW are reporting a devastating prison riot. This was in the eastern state of Veracruz at Tuxpan Prison.
Prison riots in Mexico are unfortunately not uncommon.
This one tragically left 7 inmates dead, 11 injured. A grim toll. It seems to speak to deeper systemic problems in their prison system.
Absolutely. When you look at the bigger picture, prison riots often act as this disturbing microcosm of wider societal issues. They reflect deep-seated challenges with governance, the pervasive influence of organized crime, sometimes fundamental human rights abuses within the system.
What sparked this particular riot?
Reports suggest inmates were protesting against persistent extortion and abuse allegedly carried out by a criminal organization called Grupo Sombra. Mexican prisons are notoriously plagued by huge challenges: chronic overcrowding, rampant corruption, often insufficient security. This allows powerful criminal groups like Grupo Sombra to effectively control facilities from the inside.
And this Grupo Sombra?
They're known for brutal violence in the Veracruz region, involvement in femicides, frequent violent confrontations with rival cartels over territory. So this riot, it isn't just an isolated burst of unrest. It's really a symptom of that larger systemic struggle for control, for justice, both within Mexico's prisons and in society more broadly. It highlights the severe limits on state authority in certain areas.
Okay, this next story. It's incredibly disturbing. Frankly, it's hard to even talk about.
Yeah.
BBC conducted an investigation, and they uncovered online networks with links to the UK involved in the systematic mutilation and torture of cats and kittens.
Oh no, that's horrific.
The details are sickening. Electrocution, drowning, starvation. It just raises profound questions about the darkest corners of the internet, doesn't it? How is this even a thing people are doing?
It is truly abhorrent. This investigation reveals a deeply concerning, frankly sickening side of some online communities, and it unequivocally highlights the urgent need for much stronger enforcement against these kinds of activities.
How do these networks even operate?
The BBC's report showed how the perceived anonymity, the global reach of online platforms, can unfortunately facilitate extreme cruelty. It allows individuals engaged in these horrific acts to connect, share content, even commission acts of torture. It underscores the immense challenge authorities face in trying to monitor, identify, and prosecute people involved in this across vast digital platforms. And it really emphasizes how important public awareness, vigilant reporting, is in trying to combat these networks. It speaks to a very dark side of human behavior that social media platforms are clearly struggling, perhaps failing, to contain.
Okay, let's move on. A couple of crime updates from the United States now. The New York Times and NBC News report an ongoing manhunt in Montana. A suspect is sought after a bar shooting where 4 people were tragically killed.
4 fatalities. Terrible.
The city is reportedly on lockdown, and authorities are warning the gunman could still be in the area, maybe return, creating a really tense, dangerous situation for everyone there.
An active threat situation.
Right.
Very frightening for the community.
Meanwhile, in Tennessee, Yahoo and the Washington Post detail charges against 2 men. They're charged as accessories after the fact to first-degree murder.
Accessories. In what case?
They allegedly assisted a suspect who's accused of killing 4 relatives of an abandoned infant.
Good heavens. A truly shocking case.
U.S. Marshals are offering a reward for information leading to the main suspect, the fugitive. And there are serious concerns being raised about the public danger if this suspect remains at large.
Understandably. Both these incidents, though geographically separate, they just highlight the ongoing, persistent challenges with violent crime in different parts of the U.S. and the critical importance of public safety efforts. In Montana, the active manhunt, the lockdown, that underscores the immediate, palpable threat from an armed suspect at large, creates a deeply unsettling environment. The Tennessee case, with the accessory charges, it shows the complex web that can surround heinous crimes, and the determination of law enforcement to pursue everyone involved. It also reflects those real community fears about the danger posed by a violent fugitive still out there, underscores the ripple effects of violence on public trust and security.
Let's transition now to healthcare. Always a critical area, always seems to be under immense pressure globally. We're seeing a real mixed bag in healthcare news today, some positive steps, but also highlighting systemic challenges and the pressure on public services.
Yes, it's rarely straightforward in healthcare.
Let's start with some genuinely good news from the UK. The BBC reports the rollout of a gonorrhea vaccine.
A vaccine for gonorrhea, that's significant.
Doctors are saying these jabs could actually save the National Health Service, the NHS, millions of pounds over the next decade.
That's a profoundly positive development. It really showcases the tangible impact that proactive public health initiatives can have. Not just on individual health, obviously, but on the long-term financial health of a national system like the NHS. Preventative measures like vaccines for STIs, they can significantly reduce the burden of disease down the line. That leads to substantial cost savings, less treatment needed, less long-term care, fewer resources spent on public health campaigns related to it. It's a really strategic, smart investment in the nation's health and its fiscal stability.
But then on the flip side, the BBC is also covering serious criticism directed at the Welsh NHS. Apparently, they weren't consistently sending letters to patients about treatment delays.
Oh dear. Communication breakdowns are always problematic.
And this led to the NHS in England being instructed to prioritize Welsh patients to clear the backlog, which in turn is now causing increased waiting times for other patients in England.
So a knock-on effect across the border.
Yeah, raising big concerns about efficiency, communication, fairness within the broader UK healthcare system.
That really highlights significant, deep-seated systemic challenges, doesn't it? Stresses on the NHS model. The issue with Welsh NHS communication and the subsequent prioritization ripple effect in England, it clearly illustrates the strain on resources and the potential for inequities, an uneven playing field, depending on where you live in the country. That can lead to immense frustration for patients, prolonged suffering, a feeling of unfairness.
And there was another concern raised.
Yes, Yahoo reported a coroner expressing concerns about the NHS 101 call handling system. This followed the tragic death of a baby. The coroner worried the issues might be affecting things on a wider scale.
That's incredibly serious.
It is. It suggests potential flaws in what is often the critical first point of contact for people needing urgent medical advice. It raises profound questions about patient safety, the consistency of care provided, the reliability of automated triage systems. Both these points, the cross-border waiting lists, the 111 concerns, they just underscore the constant immense pressure public health services are under, trying to balance soaring demand, finite resources, and the absolute need for effective, transparent communication. It's a tough balancing act.
Okay, let's wrap up with a few highlights from the worlds of sports and culture. These often capture broader societal moments, don't they? Whether it's controversy, tragedy, or moments of celebration. First, a rather unsettling report from RT. A video has apparently surfaced showing Ukrainian soccer ultras hardcore fans from the Virs Rivne football club.
Ultras can sometimes be problematic.
These fans were filmed making Nazi salutes and chanting nationalist slogans during a match against Dynamo Kyiv.
Oh, that's deeply disturbing.
Especially now.
And despite the clear footage, RT reports there's been no official reaction yet from Ukrainian authorities. That's a really troubling report. It highlights the unfortunate persistent presence of extremist elements within sports fandom which, sadly, isn't unique to any one country. But when ultras engage in such overt displays of hateful ideology, it risks profoundly damaging a nation's image internationally, especially for a country like Ukraine, which is actively seeking global support and trying to project a positive identity. It inevitably provides propaganda material for adversaries, no matter how isolated these incidents might actually be within the broader society. It also speaks to the internal challenge of confronting extremist elements within a society already under the immense strain of war, a complex internal dynamic.
In other news, much sadder news, the BBC reports a fan tragically died after falling at an Oasis concert at Wembley Stadium in London.
Oh, how awful.
The band expressed profound shock and sadness, and it's prompted immediate reflection on concert safety, crowd management practices at these huge venues, a very sobering reminder about safety at massive public events.
Indeed. Anytime a tragedy like this occurs at a large public gathering, especially involving such a famous band, it sparks immediate and necessary questions. Questions about crowd control, venue security, the adequacy of emergency response plans. It's a constant, complex challenge for event organizers, balancing huge crowds, enthusiastic fans, logistical efficiency, with ensuring the absolute safety of every single person there. Sometimes, sadly, it takes a tragedy to highlight areas needing improvement and reinforce those critical responsibilities.
On a much more uplifting note, DW covered the Catholic Church's Jubilee of Youth event in Rome.
Ah, yes, a major event for the church.
Pope Leo IV celebrated Mass with over 1 million young people. They came from nearly 150 countries, gathered at Rome's University of Tor Vergata.
Over 1 million young people. That's an extraordinary gathering.
It really highlights the enduring global reach of faith, doesn't it?
It's an incredible demonstration of faith, certainly, but also global unity, youth engagement, bringing together such an immense, diverse crowd from almost every corner of the planet. It vividly highlights the power that major religious institutions still have to mobilize, inspire, connect vast communities across continents and cultures, offering a sense of shared purpose, maybe hope, in what's often a very turbulent world. It's a significant cultural and spiritual phenomenon.
And finally, a farewell to a very familiar face from television's past. AP News and the New York Times report the peaceful passing of popular 1980s actor Lonnie Anderson.
Oh, Lonnie Anderson, from WKRP in Cincinnati.
Exactly. Known for her iconic role as Jennifer Marlowe in that hit TV series. She passed away at age 79. It's generated a wave of tributes from fans from the entertainment industry.
She was indeed a beloved figure for many people. Known not just for WKRP, but just for being a distinctive presence on TV throughout the 80s. Her passing really marks the end of an era for fans of classic television. It's natural for a loss like that to prompt reflection on the cultural impact these performers had, the memories they created for millions. It reminds you of the power of popular culture to connect us, even across generations.
So looking back on everything we've covered today, we've really gone on an extensive deep dive, haven't we?
We certainly have covered a lot of ground.
From that delicate diplomatic dance between Pakistan and Iran, aiming for that huge $10 billion trade boost, better regional security.
All the way to the stark realities we discussed in Gaza. The war crime accusations, the dire humanitarian crisis, those complex, heartbreaking debates around aid and hostage conditions.
We navigated the incredibly fragmented situation in Syria, didn't we? Saw how local conflicts get tangled up with international interventions, the lingering threat from groups like ISIL.
And we examined the profound economic fallout from geopolitical choices. The EU's reported $1 trillion hit from cutting ties with Russia.
The ongoing battles over U.S. aid to Ukraine, revealing those accusations of betrayal, economic coercion, things that ripple right across global markets.
And we touched on critical issues affecting daily life, too. The UK's arguments over car finance compensation, the increased efforts against people smuggling.
Those harrowing stories of migrant journeys off Yemen's coast, the immense challenges facing healthcare systems like the NHS.
We even caught glimpses of that diverse tapestry of global events, the concerning undertones in sports fandom, moments of collective cultural celebration, and times of remembrance.
We genuinely hope this deep dive has given you, our listener, a clearer, maybe more nuanced picture of some of the world's most pressing issues, without hopefully feeling too overwhelmed by it all.
Yes, the aim is always to equip you with that deeper understanding, something that goes beyond just the headlines, helps you connect the dots between events that might seem unrelated at first glance.
And As we consider just the sheer volume of information we've talked through today, all the diverse, often conflicting perspectives on these global events,
Yeah,
it really does force you to reflect, doesn't it?
it certainly makes you think.
In a world that says it's striving for international cooperation for stability, how do we actually balance national interests, individual freedoms, with the collective good? Especially when those interests clash so dramatically, as we've seen in so many examples today.
It's the perennial challenge.
What new forms of diplomacy, maybe even completely new ways of engaging the public, might be needed to try and bridge these widening gaps, to foster some genuine understanding, something to perhaps mull over?
A provocative thought indeed.
Thank you for diving deep with us today.
We'll be back soon with more insights.